Hi and welcome to the Mailbox, where we discuss some of the more interesting comments to have appeared on the channel from the last week. This week there's, well, a bit about retail, a bit about the World of Warcraft Classic that's coming out, and a few things, of course, about the leveling experience. This is a bit of a recurring theme at the moment, as well as something slightly spoilerish, but I'm going to stick that question, or comment rather, at the end. So the first thing we do is, where's the mailbox? So this was last week's. A few of you correctly identified that it's in Eastern Plaguelands, and it was indeed Zulmasha, which is the undead troll area. There was even a comment from someone trying desperately to get there. I think they were a lower level character and constantly having the trolls pop up. I remember doing this in vanilla myself. My abiding memory of this actually from vanilla is on a character that had mining. And actually, that might be my paladin. Yeah, my paladin, I leveled up as a tailor enchanter and then switched to mining blacksmithing, and then eventually got rid of the mining and got enchanting back, so just enchanted blacksmith, which is what I am now and have been ever since. But nonetheless, at the time, I remember trying to fight my way through these undead trolls to get to a node. I can't remember, it was possibly Mithril. I suppose it probably would have been Mithril at the time. Could have been thorium. And it was just getting there, fighting my way through, only to have a rogue suddenly pop up and nick it in front of me. Ooh, didn't like that. Not so bad these days, where everyone can tap it as long as they do it within a certain amount of time. So anyway, well done. That was Zulmasha. This week's potentially tricky. You may have to know where it is. So again, what you have to say with this, it's no good just putting the zone. You do have to put the zone down, but also the specific place within the zone, and it does have a specific name if you look on the map as well. So that is this week, so let us get on to the comments. Now, first of all, of course, we had a world first race in the last week, which was very entertaining. I'd completely forgotten about this. No, that's the wrong one. That's from last week. That was left in. The real one. I am a sucker for a pun. It's a very mean one, not at all justified, but yes, limits lack method. Very good. But nonetheless, yeah, we've had quite a few now. I think how many up to now? There was someone who's just done it a couple of hours ago, Korean guild. So we've got a few guilds that have killed it now. It just sort of shows the standard when, you know, method killed it, and then, you know, not too long after, the day after, limit killed it. And then over this last week, we've had a few also do it. It sort of shows how tight it can be. What we just need someone to beat them. You know, not that I have anything against method, but I just feel we need someone else to win. It's a little bit like a competition, like an international sports competition, where the same one wins. And you know it's tight each time, but when it's the same one each time, you just think, could just do with someone just beating them. So we'll have to see what happens next time. When I say next time, do I really mean next time? Because the next time's that really short raid. I really mean, you know, the Ashara raid, I think, is the next really exciting one. But anyway, let's get on to the actual proper comments. So, someone's saying here, I think they'll abandon BFA soon like WoD. We always go around doing world quests, looking at the world and saying this is amazing, but what happened to the content? And we aren't even raiders. We're really easily pleased. Go slow players. I certainly am at the moment, blimey. It's just after how amazing Legion was, I thought we could never have had a bad expansion. Well, I'm looking forward to making my potato person druid. Yes. Now, I mean, I don't believe they will. It is, I mean, like I've been talking about, you know, I keep going over about this. This seems to be a recurring theme as well as the leveling. And it's just, they have this situation where they've got to do more work on BFA to get it up to scratch without hurting the development of the next expansion, and all without being able to get extra resources. I mean, I was a little bit worried, I have to say, when earlier last year, Ian Hazakostas was starting to publicly say, oh, we need more resources, we need more developers, that sort of thing. And that was clearly, this happened, you see this happening in various industries. And it's always as a result of them trying to pitch internally for more resources, and then they try and get public opinion on their side to try and put pressure on the people who could do it, because they're getting nowhere. So whether rightly or wrongly, and I've said before, I think the problem with Ian Hazzikos is I don't think he knows how to run a development team like this. I'm not saying there are people there who would. You know, it's a particular set of skills required to coordinate a team like that, for which really they should be getting training, and I doubt he's had any training. But the problem is that I do think he's inefficient. But whatever it is, the bottom line is he is saying he can't do his job effectively without more resources. And he's not getting more resources, getting fewer. So that's a bit of a worry. And so it's, what do you do? Do you sacrifice something for the next expansion? Do you sacrifice something from the current expansion? Because surely it's got to be one of those two things, or a combination of the two. Someone's saying here they'd abandon it. I don't believe they'll abandon it. I absolutely believe that there will be things they've planned that will fall by the wayside. I don't think they will abandon any content that is expected. The problem is, WoD was a big blow for them. And if they were to repeat it, you've already got to look at the situation. BFA has already lost a lot of subscribers. They're not saying, it's clear. It's evident first and foremost from Blizzard's reaction at the time when it was believed to have happened. They suddenly started throwing lots and lots of feedback our way, and then it stops. They thought, oh, we've done the job now. We've placated them. No, you haven't. Anyway, never mind. Now, if they were to abandon features that we are expecting, in other words, that they've basically announced, that would be a massive problem. And yes, you could argue that they could, just as they did with Legion, because Legion benefited from a number of things, not least of which was that they transferred resources from WoD to Legion. And yes, they could do the same thing on the next one. But how many people would that cost them? The people who may never stick around to see the next expansion. You know, and given that it's a subscription-based game and gets an awful lot of its money from subscriptions, and when I say an awful lot, I don't mean a large minority. It seems, from what someone who worked at Blizzard was saying, and will still presumably speak to people who work there. Okay, it's not as reliable as getting it from the horse's mouth itself. Gets the bulk of its money from subscriptions. You can't even sort of say to yourself, well, all right, if a few people unsubscribe over BFA, to come back for Revenge of the Potato People, buy the box set, which itself is worth several months of subscription, and then it works out quite well and they subscribe for a few months there. That doesn't sound like it's going to compensate them. That sounds like alarm bells. And you've got to think from a business point of view in terms of the people running it, that where's the cut-off point? Where's the point at which they say, all right, yes, you've got plans for the next 6 years of World of Warcraft, and we were going to be completely happy for you to do that. But now we're thinking to ourselves, we should just run it along a Lord of the Rings Online basis where you have, yes, you have regular content, but it's not that much. You know, and it goes into a decline phase. You know, when's the point at which Blizzard decide that future expansions are just going to be new content to hold the players who want to play it, and are no longer there to try and excite, retain, and attract new players? We may not be far from it. I don't know. I don't know what happens internally. But what I do know is I do not believe that those... Because straight away, I mean, you've got to think about those developers from just a selfish point of view. If that happens, they're going to dramatically reduce the size of the development team, aren't they? Of course they are. They won't need as many. So that's jobs on the line. Yes, some of them may transfer to another project within Blizzard. You presume they're going to still carry on making new games. But for some of them, that won't be the case. So anyway, that's my views on that anyway. I think the developers will fight tooth and nail to not have that happen. Next one. So DKs. So someone's saying here, I mean, Death Knights become no new race since Cataclysm. And then someone else replied there that the Death Knight starting area literally takes place before Cataclysm. Yes, it does. So they couldn't possibly send new races back in time to experience that. They won't likely add new Death Knight races until they create a completely new starting experience for the next Death-themed expansion, which could very well be immediately after BFA, which it could be. So, okay, what I would say about this is First of all, yes, okay, the starting stuff for the Death Knight is before Cataclysm, absolutely. But it's not like other leveling experiences make sense chronologically either. So there would be nothing to stop them. I would certainly suggest... See, here's the thing, right? Let's look at some of the races that could have played that. So Worgen, for example. Worgen existed before Cataclysm. They weren't members of the Alliance. So, yes, the idea of a Worgen Death Knight doing all that starting experience and being described as a former hero of the Alliance and all the rest of it would sound strange, but not as strange as some of the ridiculous things that we have to do when we level now that's completely out of sync. Apart from anything else, as I say, Worgen did exist. It's not beyond... And remember, our characters are unique characters. You know, it's not the bounds of possibility that there existed somewhere in the Alliance a Worgen hero who'd come from Gilneas and, you know, wasn't like the normal Worgen that we'd hitherto seen in Duskwood. That's not impossible. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. And then the same thing, you know, like a goblin. You know, there would have been goblins who just independently worked for the Horde anyway. So the idea of a goblin Death Knight, again, you could get away with that. Pandaren is the one that you'd probably say not, even though Pandaren, you know, we had Chen Stormstance, we had a Pandaren sort of visit the Horde, so you could have sort of done that. Again, it wouldn't have been impossible. Pandaren existed, they just weren't really wandering Azeroth. But at least one had made it to Azeroth. Who's to say another couldn't have done? So again, you can make a case for all these things. The problem is that just in terms of it making sense as them being members of the Alliance or members of the Horde, yes, I grant you that doesn't make that much sense, but it doesn't make any less sense than the stuff we already have to do. Such as a low level, I always say this, it's the big example I always use, as a low level, doing quests that are tidying up after the Lich King has been defeated, and then you get to level 70, and it's, oh, you need to go to Northrend to defeat the Lich King. Is there another Lich King? No, it's the same one that you were doing the stuff after we defeated it. You seem to have come back in time. I'm not sure how that's happened. Maybe a Bronze Dragon did it. You know, so does it make less sense than that? I would argue not. That being said, you're talking about here a new starting experience. I would absolutely do that anyway, right? The starting experiences that we have for all races, apart from the allied races, don't make sense in the modern timeline. So I would, and it would have been fine if they didn't keep monkeying about with the timeline. Because I'm absolutely fine with, for example, a level 1 being set at the time of vanilla. If they'd have left that alone, that would make perfect sense. Because then our character, as it levels, moves through the epochs of World of Warcraft. Epoch's a grand name for actually just a few years. But, you know, no problem with that at all. But it doesn't make sense anyway now. But I would still, for the Death Knights, I would create a new starting experience with the new Lich King. And yes, they may well be waiting for the new Lich King expansion before they do that. But is there any real need? It's not like he hasn't shown his face since Wrath anyway. You know, we had him poke up during Legion. So I think they could absolutely do that. I absolutely believe they could do that. Next one, killing gnomes. So it says, also, I've always played Alliance and also love killing gnomes. Good. The only time I've ever rolled Horde was to make an undead rogue for the sole purpose of going to the starting zone and dropping explosive sheep near the quest to kill sheep. I'm guessing then this must have been an old gnome starter quest, because I don't remember that ever doing one like that. I'll tell you what I do remember though, when I was new to the game and what some naughty Horde players used to do. I actually experienced a similar situation to this actually in Warhammer Online, but it was, you know, where it was much worse. But there was a particular thing in Vanilla where there was no real good reason to kill sheep. I think, could you skin them a little bit? I can't remember. But I know that what people would do, it wasn't like hugely widespread, but I had observed this aberrant behaviour now and then, where you'd get a horde mage go back to like Elwyn Forest area and they'd polymorph a wolf. So you might get like a new player, then they might have to wait around for a bit, because I say you didn't just habitually go around killing sheep, they were just critters, no point. But some people used to. I mean, I used to be, I'll be honest, coming out of Stormwind, I very frequently used to run past and kill the cow. You know, just on your way past, bang, moo, bump. But yeah, so they'd polymorph sheep, and in the hope that a low-level player would then attack the sheep. It wouldn't die straight away, of course, because it wasn't a sheep, it was a wolf, and they've now broken it out of the polymorph, and you've got this wolf savaging them now. So, you know, or it didn't have to be a wolf, it could be anything else, but the particular mage, when I saw it myself doing it, was doing it to wolves. So, you know, the idea of doing that. Now, I'll tell you where I used to kill what should have been like friendly players to me. And I only did this to try and take out gnomes. Unfortunately, there was quite a lot of collateral damage. And this was during, I'm pretty sure this was during TBC. It involved Kazakh. But it was TBC Kazakh. So what I used to do is the only place I could do this was Ironforge. No, Stormwind. Not Ironforge. Didn't work in Ironforge very well. Stormwind. That's right. I tried to do it in Ironforge because I expected more gnomes there. I had to do it in Stormwind. It's the only place I could realistically do it. And what happened was with the Kazakh, which I suppose is still up there, TBC land now. I don't think they removed it. Is of course he puts the thing on you where if your mana gets down to 0, you start exploding, boom, 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 with lots of shadow damage. So, and it will tick down your health as well. He puts this dot on you. So what I used to do sometimes, you'd go to, when he was still up, after it was, you couldn't realistically do this too often in the early part of TBC because people wanted to be killing it. But later on, when people got bored of it, and you'd engage it, get your debuff from him before he kills you, then use Lay on Hands. Now, what Lay on Hands did then for a paladin is it basically removed all your mana, but if you had it talented, you would get like 20% mana back. So you need a bit back. So you do that. Then quickly Hearthstone, and it was set in the little inn in Stormwind. Run straight out where there was a mailbox immediately outside, where of course you'd get a lot of players congregating, quite a lot of them low-level players, and a few of them may be gnomes. That was the hope. A few of them may be gnomes. And when your mana got down to 0, you just boom, and you just kill a load of these new players. It was a pretty shitty thing to do because there were non-gnomes in there as well. But as far as I was concerned, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. But yes, so there's an awful lot of things you could do to kill friendly players, which Blizzard have unsportingly removed over the years, I have to say. Next one. So, private servers in Vanilla WoW. It says, WoW had private servers in Vanilla now. Indeed they did. Yes, I've talked about these before. It says, their reasoning was not wanting to pay a monthly sub after having paid for a box game. WoW private servers and their rationale, I think you mean, defense for validity existence in the following, some actually valid. Yeah, I think what the point here is that obviously there's a lot of people who play on private servers. They play vanilla private servers, and you know, you would have it believed that those players will suddenly come swarming to World of Warcraft when Classic WoW launches. But of course it won't, because it's true, just as you had a lot, and it wasn't just a little thing, it was a huge private server community in vanilla as well, when you could actually play vanilla and without all the glitches and problems and unreliability of the private servers. The reason people are doing it is because it's free, and the same thing will still apply now. I don't know how many people who are not currently paying for a sub will pay for a sub to play Classic WoW. I'm sure it will be a non-zero number. It may even be quite a lot. But it will not destroy the private servers, because they don't just exist because they are offering vanilla WoW. They exist because some people just want to play a game for free. And that's ultimately it. And that will still apply then. I think Blizzard's hope will be that maybe it will massively reduce that number. At least they won't have an excuse. Well, they will. You know what they'll be like. Because they'll say, oh, this isn't really vanilla. No, of course it's not really vanilla. We're 14 years on. That's just the way it is. But yeah, that's certainly true. You say, so let's have a look at the next bit. You're saying, Burning Crusade, enchants gems gear, 70s carrying 60s was making it hard to maintain true and honest level 60 max skills, even those with progression rules. I think this was talking about the fact, because I was saying that actually, if vanilla hadn't have been touched, I wouldn't be interested in Classic WoW at all. Because for me, it's just nostalgia. I don't want to go through it again. I've done it once already. It was fun. I've done it. You know, it's... So I think what they're trying to say is that if they had left it in, it's not like you'd be able to have the vanilla experience in the live version of WoW. Well, no, you can't. And I said at the time, apart from anything else, your characters have changed. You know, you've got access to different types of gear. And... so you won't get that experience from the game as it is now. But that's not the experience I'm after. You know, I'm not after running around having to bore mobs to death to kill them. You know, I'm not after the vanilla combat experience. I'm not after the vanilla healing experience. I'm not after any vanilla experience other than the fact that I enjoyed the quests and I enjoyed the zones. I enjoyed, you know, the way it was. So that's why, as I say, if they hadn't pissed about with it in Cataclysm, I'd just be thinking, yeah, okay, it's great for people who want to do that. That's not going to be me. But I will play a bit of it because actually I do miss those zones and quests and things like that. Next one says, time to go back to the real WoW. This summer, retail is dead. Well, it's not dead, even though I've mused recently that it may not have more players than other MMOs now. There may well be one or two MMOs that have now got more players than WoW. Who knows? It may be about the same. But dying, yes. I mean, these things go down in jumps, remember. Even when they used to announce sub-numbers, you could sort of see it go... you know, there was occasionally a little bit of gradual stuff, I suppose, but generally it was like in quantum leaps down. And it's probably going to, I suppose, stabilise at a point now, and then there might be another jump up or down, depending how it goes. But over time, declining, certainly, as any game does. But about the real WoW, no. I think people are overstating how it will do. The problem is, I've already said this before, it'll be very difficult to judge. Now, obviously, there's going to be a certain number of classic servers come out. I suppose this will be the only test we can get, because we won't... It'll be very... I mean, Blizzard won't announce numbers anyway. We won't know how many extra subscribers there are to WoW just for playing the retail. Just for playing Classic, sorry. And of course, there may be many people playing WoW Classic that are currently already playing retail as well. But I suppose the test will be this. 6 months later, 12 months later, there are a certain number of Classic servers. Do Blizzard reduce them down and offer... Do they basically merge servers, get people to transfer from one server to another and close them down? In which case, the numbers are not as high as expected. Or do they add on more servers? Not for anything special, not as new servers as such, but just to manage and offer like migration to them, something like that. In which case, it'll be more popular than they're anticipating. That'll be the only way I think we can get to judge it. You know, if they add or remove realms from the classic WoW servers. Because we'll not find out about actual numbers, of course. And I know what some people will be like, because you get some people who will say, oh, you know, retail is dead. I go out into the world and there's like hardly anyone there. And they'll go on to classic WoW and there'll be loads of people there. Oh, this is better. There's loads of players playing this. And the problem is, of course, sharding can make you believe there are fewer players than there actually are. Because although sharding is supposed to put you in with other players at times, it's also supposed to keep those numbers manageable. So it also has the effect of reducing the number of players you will come across. Whereas in WoW Classic, although there's going to be minimal, there's going to be a little bit of sharding when they first announce it. And then I think they may have said something about sharding in cities or something. I don't know. But generally speaking, it won't be a thing out in the world after it's no longer new. So yeah, you can easily get people going, oh, there's loads of people here. I mean, on the first day, I'm sure people will say that, but that'll be brainless because, you know, the first day there'll be a lot of curiosity. People will just create a character and then do nothing with it, just to see, just for the hell of it. But no, I don't. I'd be very surprised. Not as I say, not that we can ever judge ever. If it actually attracts that many purely retail players, you know, in other words, adds that many new subs onto it. And I doubt Blizzard will say either way either anyway, so it's pure speculation. New player stuff now. There's a little trio of new player comments. There's agreed with the continuity of the leveling experience. Big problem for new players. Blizz will never go back to the 1 to 60 zones and fix the law or the order that new players experience it. To me, they should have starter zones for each race that are 100% independent of the current timeline or expansion. Small, minor enemies and questlines, etc. Then after players complete them, they'll immediately go off to the latest expansion and can level 100% in the latest expansion zones, dungeons, expeditions, etc. If they choose to go back to old zones and do that content, the game should make it obvious that you experience a prior timeline event with either a UI element with a little expansion logo somewhere for you to zone or you're in. So I'll do that one first of all. Okay, so yes, they are not going to go back and change it now. They don't have the resources. I don't think they've got the resources to make any major changes, which is why I've now abandoned all hope of player housing. I mean, common sense should have caused me to abandon it years ago, but I kept holding out hope. Because it's a bit like the classic WoW situation, isn't it? You know, Blizzard were dead set against classic WoW, dead set against it. No, absolutely not. Then all of a sudden, oh yeah, we'll bring out classic WoW. And you think to yourself, have they changed their mind? I don't think so. I think it's just with the shifting of the dynamics within the leadership structure. You know, whenever Blizzard say a thing that they are of a view, that's not everyone at Blizzard. That's just the view of the influential leadership. So when that leadership changes, the view of the company can appear to change, but the company is not one person with their own mind. Many minds. It's a massively schizophrenic organisation. So as soon as, you know, that dynamic changes, the view can be changed completely. So I kept thinking to myself, well, maybe the dynamic will change such that the people who actually, there must be people at Blizzard that are going, we should be doing player housing, what is wrong with you? Would actually get there and would go, we're doing player housing. I just don't think they can now. Because as they've already shown, and I know, and I talked about this recently, it is possible that all the tech changes made development of all the content more difficult for BFA, but it still showed that they are not capable of making major changes to the game as well as getting out a good quality expansion. They've shown that. So, you know, they're not going to voluntarily then just do something massively new. So yes, I completely agree. They're not going to monkey about with the 1 to 60 zones. I'd be amazed if they did. The idea of starter zones that are independent of the current timeline or expansion, absolutely. I mean, you've got to bear in mind it was anyway. It's Cataclysm that changed that. They decided to make the Cataclysm theme all about Deathwing and post-Scourge stuff. So in vanilla it was, you know, it was, in fact, many of the storylines were harking back to several years before World of Warcraft. So they were, you know, they could easily have sat now, easily. But then the idea of you do your starter zone, then go into the latest content. You know, I think they should do something like that, or at least allow it, because what, and I've said this before, what they are advertising is the latest content in the latest expansion. A new player does not get to experience that unless they use their level boost. And then it's reliant upon them having chosen the correct class, which they can have no sensible way of doing, just pot luck. Even if they've got friends advising them, you know. So, yes, I think they should. That being said, I also accept that there is a groundswell of opinion that that they should keep the zone scaling in blocks rather than just letting you go wherever you want. But because Elder Scrolls Online do that, although, you know, because what they do is they just automatically, when you create a new character, shove you in to the latest content. Now, I always choose in my character to go back and do the earlier stuff anyway. But they encourage you, they're getting you straight into the latest version of the game, which, you know, is very good for a new player, I think. And you don't lose anything. You still go back and do the other stuff anyway because it's all scaled. Anyway, it says, you read somewhere years ago, Blizzard reveals that that the level 30 to 40 range is where most new players either trudge on to maximum level or leave the game. The game is a real slog at this point and only gets worse in Outlands Northrend, and you think getting players out of old, incoherent, and more importantly, empty zones as soon as possible by getting to new zones will help them around longer. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't seen that actually. That is interesting. It doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, I'll be honest, it happens to me. When I think that's the range that my Void Elf Shadow Priest is in at the moment. I've probably got a few characters dotted around in that level range. Usually I end up deleting them though. But I can well believe it. And the problem is, of course, there's two issues. One is, as you say, once you've done that amount, you're pretty much done with that experience. But that experience ain't going away. And the second, and the second thing is just the length of time it takes to get to level cap. So you've got two issues here. One is the leveling experience is too monotonous for the length of time it takes, and two, there's too much time needed to do it. And I know you could argue you could keep the time the same if they added in much more exciting and varied things to do, but I still think there's a limit. I think in terms of the content that exists in World of Warcraft, even if you gave them access to stuff that's ordinarily only for level cap players, and there's nothing to stop them doing that because you can scale that as well. Nonetheless, the length of time it takes to level is just excessive. Absolutely excessive. And I'm talking about that from the point of view of using heirlooms. New players not going to have heirlooms. Unless they have a rich friend who gives them a load of gold to buy them. And tells them about them. Because you don't naturally come across them, do you? So, it's... yes, I mean, those are the twin problems. And I think they should address both of them, not just one of them. Yes, they could just reduce it so that the length of time it takes to get to level cap is round about the same it takes now, or maybe a year, because obviously now they have reduced it anyway, but not enough. But if you talk about a few years ago, the length of time it took those few years ago to get to round about level 40. Because bear in mind, you say they're stopping round about level 34, that's because they know they're nowhere near. Whereas if it took round about the same amount of time to get to level cap as it takes to get to level 60, they'd probably push on from 40. Because, well, it's not that much longer. So that's what I would do. Do what MMOs do, for goodness sake, modern MMOs. You have a set level cap, which doesn't change ever. Then if you want a Paragon leveling system, do that. That is account wide. So you only have to do it on a character, and then every other character wants to... They have to do the normal leveling, get to level whatever, 60 let's say, because that's what it started off in vanilla. And then they're at the same Paragon level as your account. That works better. Next one, another little... I hadn't actually considered this, I have to say. It says, I think the worst thing they've ever implemented was allied races. It's very unfriendly to new players that might be interested in starting the game wanting a certain race. They would have to level a race they don't really want all the way to max level, then grind reputation to Exalted for the allied race they want, which could be in old Legion content or new BFA content. Next, they have two options. Pay for a race change, if they don't want the heritage armor, or level the new allied race from... Well, it's not 1 to 110, it's 20, isn't it? 20 to 110 for the heritage gear. And then, of course, to 120 to actually play BFA. Either option is getting Blizz more money in upfront cash or longer subscription, which I suspect is going to be the clinching argument for Blizzard. If I told my friend this is what you need to do if you want to play that Zandalari troll, he would say, nah, I'll just play a different game. I can't disagree with that. I'd never actually thought about it from that point of view. But yeah, I mean, as I've said before, cosmetic options are super important for a role-playing game. And in modern times, where you've got a lot of role-playing games with very advanced customization features, Blizzard isn't helping itself with things that it can help. They might come up with all sorts of arguments for why they can't produce character models with the sort of advanced customization that you get in other games. But when it comes to, get on my transmog high horse again, you know, transmog, but also, yeah, races. And they've got all these restrictions on them. Faction restrictions. And as you say, what you have to do for an allied race is quite obscene for a new player. You know, the very idea of it is madness, you know. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I can see that does probably put off players. It says, in my opinion, the allied races should never have been locked behind any max level grind and instead available from character selection screen, and the quest that you get to unlock the allied race can instead be the quest that you do when you start a new one. They would never do that, though. The thing is, allied races were developed, I believe, entirely for financial reasons. I don't believe it was considered content by the development team. I believe it was considered a way to make more money. And I think that's its sole purpose, to make more money. I don't think it's there to drive any narrative. And I don't think it's there as a developer. Because if it were, right, they would have just been the sub-races that we've been asking for ages. Because for a long time, people have been asking, so when I choose a night elf, why does it have to be a night elf? Why can't I just play an alliance elf and it can be a night elf or a high elf? And now, of course, we'd say a void elf or something like that. And they would have just included sub-races as customization options. Allied races make no sense other than to make money for the company. It says, furthermore, Zandalari trolls and Kulturans are certainly different enough to not be classed as an allied race and just a part of the normal roster. Yes. And would have made a great selling point for BFA if they were released with them. But as I say, you wouldn't have to do it. You could just have brought them out as sub-races. The Zandalari trolls could just be... You just choose trolls, and it's like, do you want a Darkspear troll or a Zandalari troll? And then go through your customization options. If you want to be human, do you want to be... what would you call it? Eastern Kingdoms human, or Stormwind human, or Kulturan human. You know. It would have been quite easy. Next one. It says, appreciate what you're saying, but there are other basic issues with question as well. Leveling allied race recently got to Kunlai and found broken quests, had to give up, moved to Longyang Outpost and found more broken quests. Now, here's what I would say about this. Well, one, that's bugs. That is a different issue entirely. That doesn't require a different philosophy or attitude to leveling. That's a bug, which if Blizzard were aware of it, would put some effort into fixing. But here's where the issue lies when it comes to bugs that appear during leveling content. First of all, it's not as high priority as bugs in the endgame content where most of the players are playing. Second of all, think about the two types of player that are going to be doing that leveling. So the new player, they get to it, find a bug in there. Well, first of all, are they going to recognise it's a bug or are they just doing something wrong? So they've got that issue. That's not good. Second of all, are they going to be filling out bug reports? They may not even know how. That's an issue. Then you get a veteran player that's leveling through, such as yourself. So you're leveling through. You get to those bugs. You've just said you moved on. Before you moved on, did you fill out a bug report? You may have done. I don't know. Many people, I bet, don't. They just move on. And because they have the knowledge to simply move on, they want to level efficiently. You're presumably leveling because you want the heritage gear. So you're just suffering this for no good reason other than to get some heritage gear, which may or may not be nice. You haven't told me which race it is, so I can't judge that. If you're going to say it's a dark iron dwarf, then I'm going to say you're mad. But anyway, never mind. So you may have just, in the interest of being efficient, because stopping to fill in a bug report is not that efficient, carried on. In which case, they may not even be getting that many reports, if any, about it, because there's relatively few people doing that content. And the people who are doing that leveling content may not have, you know, you think about the number of people who are leveling, okay, that's a smaller number, the total number of people who are playing. I'm not going to say how small, I don't know. But then, not all of them go through the same experience. So that particular, you know, Longyang outpost there, a very much smaller proportion of the total number of people who are leveling are going to be going to that area to do some quests. So the number of people who will actually encounter those bugs, and that bug may also be intermittent. It may not be there all the time. It may have just affected you that time. Next person to come along, it may not affect. So, you know, you get down to it, and there's actually a really small number of people coming across these bugs. And then, if they're not even reporting it, Blizzard may not even be aware. It might be that those bugs you're talking about, there's 0 people even reported it. Perfectly possible. Whereas that would be much less likely in the latest content. So many more people coming across it, someone is bound to report it. Anyway, it says, next we went to Draenor, built the garrison and taking a flight to anywhere takes you through broken scenery. Yeah, you get that. That's been there for a while. Well, you get the picture. In BFA, there are also NPCs floating in the sky, quest markers in the wrong places. Those things at least do get reported. But always make sure you don't just assume just because it's the latest content, people will be reporting it. You always report it as well. Apart from anything else, the more people report it, the higher priority it is. Then there is the lag causing quests to spawn in as you are leaving rather than when you arrive there. At one point, some of that may be you though. You've got to bear in mind. Some of these things are latency issues. At one point, there were about 20 Horde players when I arrived in to hand a quest and no NPC to hand in. We waited about 15 minutes, but the NPC was finally there a few days later. See, I've not come across anything like that. You know, if it happens to a lot of players, then okay, that is an issue. But it needs reporting. With those 20 Horde players hanged, you know, stood around filling in a good bug report? I suspect not. We waited about 15 minutes, but the NPC was finally there a few days later. This must be very confusing to new players. Well, very dissatisfactory to new players. But as I say, I've not come across... I came across plenty of those on the alpha and the beta, but I've not come across anything like that live. Not after the first couple of days, anyway. After completing Tanan Jungle intro and most of Shadowmoon Valley, you get a pop-up quest to go to the Broken Shore. It feels like levelling is made almost irrelevant as far as the lore is concerned. Oh, your God, yeah. The lore is ripped to shreds in the levelling process. It's an absolute nightmare. A complete nightmare. You've got to remember, the lore is designed to go as follows. Your levelling experience is to introduce you to the expansion story. But the expansion story is in the end game content. You know, it's all the solo quests and scenarios, the dungeons, the raids, even the pre-expansion content, which will disappear when the new expansion comes out, is all part of that storyline. And of course, a new player, when it's old content, going through it, you're going to miss out all that story. This is why it annoyed me about the Cataclysm stuff. It's one thing during the Cataclysm levels to have all the Deathwing stuff in it and the old gods, Twilight cultists, all that sort of stuff, and then not to get any, you know, satisfactory conclusion to it. That I don't think is satisfactory, but, you know, it's one thing to at least excuse that. But to have all the Deathwing stuff in your 1 to 60 content. So now there's loads of content in your level experience which is focused on Deathwing. And there's no conclusion to that at all. But yeah, absolutely. The lore's ripped to shreds. But yeah, in terms of a lot of that stuff, I mean, that's bugs. It needs to be reported. Most people don't report it. Next one. It says, does anyone else dislike BFA leveling? I don't know why, but I've never disliked leveling this much. It feels so tedious after the second or third character. I'm an alcoholic, so I love playing multiple classes, and Legion invasions were so fun. BFA incursions are boring and even slower leveling than invasions, yes. I have noticed the same thing. Now, I will say in defense of the BFA leveling that at least you've got two very different experiences. It's not always been the case. In fact, generally has not been the case, if you consider all experiences. Expansions, I mean. You have got a completely different Alliance and Horde leveling experience, at least. But, of course, most people don't want to level a character on different factions because they want their characters to support each other, coordinate. I mean, I make them for the purpose of trade goods, so having them on different factions doesn't help. Yeah, I do as well. And, like, take WoD, for example, which was roundly panned. I actually enjoyed the leveling WoD. I made so many characters in WoD. So many characters. Because, of course, there wasn't a lot to do at endgame. I was having multiple of a certain... I had one of each class and then multiple of several of them. 4 paladins. 4 paladins. Anyway. I had so many. And all right, I got bored of it round about out number 16 or something. But even then, it was all right. It was tolerable because I enjoyed it. And you could do it in different orders and things like that. Whereas now, in BFA, and I haven't leveled more than one character in BFA since BFA came out, but I've done a few in Alpha and Beta. And I know some people say, well, of course you'll get bored if you're doing Alpha and Beta. I never have in previous expansions. It has never, you know, I've never done Alpha and Beta testing, and then expansion launched, and I've gone, oh, do you know what? I don't fancy leveling now. Because it's actually a different experience. They put things in wrong order and stuff like that when you're doing the testing. So it's fine. It's absolutely fine. normally. But for BFA, and I think the issue is, for me, when you're leveling, you're laser focused on the main quest lines. You need to do the main quest lines for endgame stuff. But doing the main quest lines means that you don't really need to do anything else. That's enough to level you. So you're getting the same exact experience time after time. The same exact leveling experience. Because you want to do these particular quests. These are the main quests you need to be doing. Do those. Oh, that's enough to level. So you're not doing very many, if any, side quests, which means you're not getting much variation. Because there's plenty of quests to have a variable leveling experience. If all you were leveling, if all you were getting the quest for was to get experience for leveling, which is how it used to be done. Whereas now, you have these main quest lines. It's forcing you through this story. It is literally like being on a guided tour around the expansion. That's the problem with it. And so you don't get to mix it up for different characters when you're leveling them up. And if you do, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, I feel. So, yeah, I think it is more boring than it used to be. And, of course, because you've got to do all the zones as well, if there's one zone you don't really like, you can't just give it a light touch, get in there, get out there. I don't like Voldum. And it's actually one of the more awkward ones to do. Next one. It says, fact is, gear has way more impact on how a spec plays and feels now than back in TBC. In TBC, you could get away with that gearing system because at the end of the day, gear had near to no impact on how you play. Apart from some outliers such as Fury Warrior. Nowadays, gear is an integral part of the gameplay, so catch-up mechanics just enable everyone to play their characters the way it's designed to. It certainly has more impact now. To say it had no impact then is not true at all. I can tell you as a paladin, it did change the way you did things. That being said, one of the great benefits of it was that it didn't ramp up in importance over the expansion. For example, I was there healing Kel'Thas. Without tier 5 tier gear, I was using tier 4. I wanted my tier 5 gear for Ret because, you know, it wasn't necessary. I didn't need the tier 5 bonuses. The tier 4 bonuses were perfectly good enough. And the extra stats in the gear wasn't actually all that vital. And in fact, it didn't do me any harm at all because our second kill of Kel'Thas, from 21% down, I was the only one left alive. I was the only healer left alive. That is obviously not the only person left alive. Oh yeah, I soloed Kel'Thas from 21% down. No, I was the only healer there because somehow the healers got themselves killed. I was talking about this recently, actually, somewhere. And there I was in my tier 4 gear. Didn't matter. It's fine. You know, you just sacrifice the gnomes. And then there's far fewer people to heal. It's all fine. So obviously you have a legendary weapon at the time as well. That you know, that helped. But the point is that I eschewed the new tier stuff. Imagine someone doing that now. No chance. I mean, I know we've had situations in Legion where some people would still want the old tier, you know, the set bonuses, stuff like that. But the rest of their gear would absolutely be the up-to-date stuff. They wouldn't be using, you know, gear from a previous raid, in all likelihood, unless it like Titan Forged. You know, so, yeah, it's it does have less impact. But it did have impact then, but much less so than now. It says, gearing is a mean to an end, not the end goal. Depends on who you ask. Blizzard, as I say, Blizzard developers are all loot whores. They're convinced that we want the power gear. It says, with that in mind, the game takes another dimension and becomes way more enjoyable. At the end of the day, just ignore those catch-up and don't get upset when others get what others get. Enjoy your time in game. Well, the problem is, of course, competing in it. Give you an example. I'm not playing it very much at all now. And I mean really not very much at all. I am like ultra casual now. Ultra casual. Much more casual than I'd intended to be. So my gear is now behind. Now yesterday, the guild I was in organised a heroic raid, out-raid for Battle for Dazalor. Now you'd think to myself, oh, I should have been right in there, get myself in, at least kill a few bosses. But my gear's just fallen too far behind. You know, I'm not even at what they were, and they weren't wanting to pug it, so they were very generously offering, you know, minimal requirements to get in. But I don't even meet that. And it's only for the sake of 2 months not really gearing myself, not doing anything that gets me more gear. You know, 2 months in vanilla or TBC, without you improving your gear wouldn't have put you that far behind, even if a new tier had come out. You know, it wouldn't that far behind. So it certainly has way more impact now than it used to. And again, I think this is deliberate. I think it's all part of the Blizzard treadmill to keep us feeling that if we stop for even a second that we're going to get behind. That, you know, that we can't, you know, although they put catch-up stuff in it, they're also telling us, but really it's not as good a substitute of just carry on playing. And, you know, so I don't think it's just naturally happened. I think it is deliberate. Right, on to the last few. It says, am I happy about what happened to Mechatalk? What, the fact that he got away? No, I'm not happy at all. Would you be? Here they are, right? They finally put a gnome into a raid. And you get to beat up a gnome. So that's very positive. Unfortunately, balancing that out is the fact that one, which is inevitable, it had to be this way. There was no other way of doing it. It's a gimmick fight. I don't like gimmick fights. Of course, I haven't experienced it, of course, but it is, of course, a gimmick fight. Don't like those. But it was always going to be. You knew it was going to be. So you prepared yourself for that. You think, well, it'll be worth it as long as we get to kill the gnome. But we don't get to kill the gnome. And I sort of knew we wouldn't get to kill the gnome. He gets away. Disappointing. You know, I'm much more disappointed than Gazlowe that he got away. But anyway, there we go. Is it Gazlowe? Am I thinking of the right one? Is that a different goblin? That's not the right one, is it? It's the name of the head goblin. Completely forgotten. Anyway. Yes, so am I happy about what happens to him? The fact that we pummel him for a bit, yeah, that's all right. Or I will do when I eventually do it on some level. But the fact that he gets away is much less interesting. And the fact that you have to endure a gimmick fight. So it's like, it's a fight where you're reminded of what's wrong with gnomes. You know, it annoys the hell out of you and you don't even get to see a dead gnome at the end of it. Next one. Oh, hello, where's my cursor gone? There it is. It says, just give in. This game has run its course. On to the next, please. What is the next, though? What is the next? Yes, there are other MMOs where I feel that certain experiences within it are better than in WoW. But you know, you're invested so much in WoW in terms of the storyline. Like, take ESO. I keep saying that as a casual player, ESO is a far better experience. Way better in every single respect as a casual player. With a couple of... No, actually, there are a couple of exceptions. One I would say is... One thing that World of Warcraft's always been very good at is accessibility. Which is actually going to come up in a video that I've intended to come out next week. Or this week, I suppose, depending on when you start the week. And that accessibility makes it very easy to get into group content, albeit very low-level group content. Which is not... Like in ESO, I don't sign up for a dungeon. It might be just me being silly about it, but I just don't do it. I'll do it at some point. But I haven't done it yet. But the other thing about ESO is, although I'm doing the quest lines and I'm doing the stories and stuff like that, and it's all right, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with the stories. I'm not really getting involved in a narrative, an overall narrative there, in the same way that you do in World of Warcraft. So this narrative, which has been going back since, I would say Warcraft 3, although obviously the storyline really started in Warcraft 1, it wasn't that involved. Warcraft 3 is when you really start to get involved in it. Warcraft 2 was better from that point of view than Warcraft 1. But Warcraft 3 is really when they went for it with the story. So from then on, you've got storylines that you're now wanting to see resolved. And it's a bit like watching a series, isn't it? With a narrative running all the way through it. And you get to the point where you're thinking, oh, they're running out of ideas here. It's not that interesting. But you struggle through because you want to see the ending. And it's a bit like that for WoW for me. I want to see the ending. I also want to give it a chance to improve, because BFA is not necessarily, definitely the start of a big decline. I just think it may be. So we'll see from that point of view as well. You know, what has Revenge of the Potato People got for someone who's, if I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be not in a position where I can be anything other than casual probably now for that's it, or at least for the next few years. So we'll see then as well. But yeah, into the next one, it's like, what next one? There isn't one that's going to replace World of Warcraft for me. Even though there are other games I enjoy playing, and as a casual I enjoy playing more. In terms of the gameplay. That's just in terms of the gameplay. Not in terms of the world or anything like that. Right, last one. This is going to be the last one. Might be a little bit spoilerish. So, if you don't wish to see the spoiler, then thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. But the last little one. It's only very minor. Tiny little minor. You'd probably work it out anyway, even if you didn't know. So, it says here... So I'm talking about, obviously, BFA being the one where we remove old gods as a threat to Azeroth. Someone here saying, well, there's a second old god now, Xal'atath. After we release her, the Void story is getting closer. Now, first of all, I'm not saying there isn't going to be a future Void story. I absolutely think there is going to be. I just think we're removing old gods as a threat to Azeroth. But when you say this, there's a second old god now, Xal'atath. After we release her... When you say we, I don't think you really mean we. I think you mean gnomes. It's the gnomes that will release her. Not to do with me. Paladins are not going to be releasing any more shadow upon the world. Far from it. This is the gnome playing classes that are going to be releasing it. Specifically one. And we all know who that is. So I just need to get that out there. Just let's make it clear that we as a collective are not going to be responsible for this event. This is going to be gnomes and gnome sympathisers. But I can't do much about those apart from keep killing them. Right, so thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content and share with others who might also be interested. Also, don't forget to say where the mailbox is this week in the comments below, as well as anything else you wish to bring up. And until next time, I'll see you later.